Thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. One of the things we struggle with as audit committee members is getting that reliance where the external auditor relies on internal audit work. And I want to link this to the reviews that have to happen. Because we also realize when we look at the information that really this information is not quality. ERBA is not invited to come and review external auditors. Do you have a mechanism maybe where you force yourself into these institutions, where you do these quality reviews, other than relying on the audit committees to recommend that process? Can you actually standardize your reviews so that you pick on a sample basis where you want to go?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just going to answer that because I didn't bring my pad with me. It's over there. Otherwise, I'm going to forget the question. Okay. Let me firstly say that the big difference between us and ERBA is that ERBA is covered by legislation and we're not. Now, so we don't have legal teeth. Where we do have the leeway is in terms of the standards, is the quality assurance reviews. And the Institute does that, but we can't force it on you. We are relying on the audit committees to make sure that you bring us in so that we can give you that. But let me just very quickly go back to what I said earlier on. As audit committees, you need to ask the question up front in terms of the capacity of your internal audit function. If you're sitting with a situation where management is deliberately appointing people that are junior, who are not really up to the level where they need to be, that's exactly what you're going to find. You know, you're going to find that when you look at your findings and you look at the reports, because we sometimes, I mean, I get scared at times as well. I look at it and I think, well, that's kind of, you're stating the obvious. The leadership needs to get insight from what it is that you're given. So look at what the recommendations are that the Institute gives in terms of making sure that your people are competent. We are, in terms of the reliance issue, we have had various discussions with the AG's office, and what we're getting to now is to be very clear, because sometimes the reliance issue is used very broadly, and it's a scope issue. You know, so we need to state that internal audit hasn't looked at this area, therefore we're looking at this area. Because if you broadly say we can't place reliance, it gives the wrong impression. Okay.
Thanks for a very brilliant presentation. My question is on the exposure of the audit committees. The Companies Act has moved focus from shareholder to stakeholder. And that's number one. Number two, also, the audit committees are now elected by the Company General Meeting, I understand. Now, my question is, with that kind of exposure, how do you see the liability of audit committees to the general public, so to speak, as was said somewhere, to an indeterminate audience for an indeterminate time?
Well, I think that the exposure is huge. Therefore, it is so important that when we're sitting on oversight bodies, that we make sure that we do everything properly and that we actually make that our fiduciary duties, that we make sure that we clean, completely clean. Because yes, we can be sued, and it is, and the liability is wide open. And if you look at the Companies Act now, that is why one of the first slides I put up, and the guy on the tightrope, that's exactly, all of us are in leadership positions, that's exactly where we are. But to cover yourself is to make sure that you follow the book, that you follow due process, but then you need to be able to consistently ask yourself, have I done my utmost best? Because if you are sued and you sit in court, what the judge is going to look at is whether you've done your job properly or not. That's the bottom line. As long as you make sure that you have done your job properly. But part of the issue is that we need to reflect on self as well. We've got to ask ourselves the question, do I really have the capacity to do this? And what I think too often happens is that we run after titles, because it's very nice to put on your CV, audit committee chair. And we're more concerned about what goes on the CV than what concerned about whether we actually have enough capacity within ourselves to fulfill this role as properly to the T in terms of the expectations on us. So if you have the capacity and you do your job properly, you shouldn't have a problem. If the suing comes, well, then you'd be able to defend yourself. Thank you.
One last question.
One last question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, you raised something about working in the interest of the public. I just have a concern that it is real that you do get audit committee members going into meetings without reading the packs. Yeah. And obviously whatever they contribute in quotes, because they won't, because they don't know what's going on, it doesn't count for anything, all their attendance. Is there anything that can be done to make sure that the company and obviously the communities can benefit from their sitting, to try and hold them responsible and accountable for their positions? That's my first question. The second one is from the internal audit point of view. You do get these death threats, it's real. Is there practically something that can be done to actually protect these auditors? Thank you.
Okay. Your first question actually tags on to what the previous gentleman was talking about. You know, in terms of, I think what is going to happen increasingly is that our citizens, our shareholders and so forth are becoming wiser, are starting to wake up to the fact that they need to hold leaders accountable. So we're going to see more and more and more of people being confronted with the fact that they have not been able to do their jobs adequately. And that is where we need to reflect as well. Certainly where it comes to, where you're saying people haven't even read the packs, yes, we see that happening very, very often in a lot of cases, and it's not just in the public sector, it's in the private sector as well. It's very, very rife. But I think what's going to happen is that our people are waking up and they're going to start very, very difficult questions. But certainly one of the questions that were asked of Mr. Gordy earlier on was, from a public sector perspective, those reports going through. South Africa had chosen a decentralized system as opposed to a centralized system that you would find in countries like Kenya and Ghana, where you've got an internal auditor general, equivalent of the auditor general, where everything is centralized and all the reports have got to go through there. If you have a similar system in terms of forcing the audit committee reports, but then also how audit committees are members are appointed, your chair, how that chair is appointed, and how the evaluations of those audit committees are being done, it's an accountability issue. But I think the pressure is going to come from underneath, and we're going to start to wake up and make sure that we bring ourselves into in line with what the expectations are of us. So she asked me two questions, and I can't remember the second one.
The second one was regarding the internal auditors getting threats in terms of...
Yes, what we can do. I get that question so frequently nowadays. Part of the problem that we as the Institute sitting with is because we don't have legal teeth, we can't go into an organization and intervene. There is an act that covers whistleblowers, but the reality on the ground is that it doesn't really play out as legislation needs it to be. What we are doing from our perspective is educating those stakeholders that can do something about it. Educating the internal auditors in terms of how to deal with issues. And I think when it comes to these when we're sitting in situations like this, we're dealing with human beings. And the human factor, we have to make sure that we deal with it in such a way that we don't put people in dangerous positions, but we're still able to tease out the issues. So my advice to internal auditors is, when you're in a situation like that, find another way. Find another way to get the message across, to get the message out. Sometimes it is not you. Maybe it is that conversation with the chairman of the audit committee that needs to take place. Get the leadership to ask the right questions in such a way that it doesn't look like you asked the question, but it's come a roundabout way, to make sure that we actually get the findings out there. But it is a difficult one, and there's no easy answer to it, because I think it comes back to where we are as a society. It's about the moral fiber of our society. The fact that we have stuff like that happening in this country says something, and the degree to which it happens says something about our broader society. So there's lots of work to be done.